And this is just absolutely incredible to see, and we're incredibly grateful. In my earlier presentation, I said, our theme is urgency and gratitude. And what I mean by that, and I'll tell again to these folks, is that what we are asking for in order to launch this project is pretty urgent. We first came here as a school interested in doing this program in early January, but we first presented this larger idea just in September of this year. And we're asking to get this project funded and off the ground by the end of the year. We understand that that is an incredibly tight timeline, which I will go over.
Kenneth.
But we're incredibly grateful that so many people in the community have helped us navigate the process, have brought you all into this room today to hear what we have to offer. So as they kind of get that going, I'll just start by talking about the school. That's what the first couple slides are. So Frank Lloyd Wright School of Architecture was founded by Frank Lloyd Wright in 1932 as an architectural apprenticeship. It was started where he is from, in Wisconsin, so started in Spring Green, and that was his home, his studio, where he worked, where he lived, and the opportunity to actually train the next generation of architects, designers, and thinkers. He did some consulting work on the Biltmore, Phoenix, and fell in love with Arizona. Fell in love with the geography, fell in love with the landscapes, fell in love with the shapes, and it really fell in love with the climate, because that winter he got pneumonia, and his doctor said if you'd stop spending the winters in Wisconsin, you'd add 10 years to your life. So he was in his mid-60s when he came out west and started Taliesen West in 1938. And to this day, it has been in continual operation. So it is one of the oldest continually operating architecture institutions in the world, over 80 years of continual operation. We still carry that tradition of splitting time between Wisconsin and Arizona. So we're on a trimester, and school is in session year-round. It's very immersive. So students will get a week break here or a 2-week break there, but it's not like your typical college, and it's continual. But they spend 5 months of the year in Spring Green, Wisconsin at our Taliesen campus, and the remainder 7 months of the year at our Taliesen West campus in Scottsdale, Arizona. That is a tradition that we have carried on each and every year. Both students and faculty and staff travel with them when we do this. It provides an incredible educational opportunity because we're a very hands-on school, so it provides students to get an opportunity to build in lush green hills as well as arid desert landscapes. We became accredited as a Master's in Architecture program in 1985 and have been accredited ever since. And I will mention the HLC in a second. That is, I kind of use the analogy like, if you're a citizen, HLC is the federal government, and the NAAB is like your local government. So HLC oversees every institution of higher learning. They have the general accreditation policies. But then every discipline has its own specific accrediting agency. In architecture, it's called the NAAB, the National Architecture Accrediting Board. They just looked at our curriculum, and they were so pleased and impressed, they issued us the maximum amount of reaccreditation they could, and they gave us 8 years. So what that says is, most schools, every year, every 2 years, have to reapply for accreditation. They said, keep doing what you're doing, we'll see you in 8 years. Which is very, very, very rare, and most schools never get that. There just shows you our campus in Spring Green, Wisconsin, as well as in Scottsdale, Arizona. And if you've ever been to either of those campuses, which we hope you all will take the opportunity to come, those were built by apprentices, brick by brick. They were built from raw materials from the McDowell Mountains. That's how our school was built. It was by students, it was by the fellowship. That is why we embody kind of that ethos today. And our vision is to teach architecture as collective experimentation that makes the world around us more open, more beautiful, and more sustainable. And as many people in this room have heard me say probably dozens of times now, every school has a tagline. Ours is to be the most experimental architecture school in the world. So we don't imitate Frank Lloyd Wright. We don't try and design buildings that look like something he would design. That's not what he would want us to do. Instead, how do we take the concepts of organic architecture, which is building with the land rather than just on it, and his principles of form meets function. How do we use that as a guiding principle in today's age to be cutting edge? So we still demand a very high level of quality, something that does honor to our name, but we also want to be experimental in how we do that. Our dean likes to say, if you want to learn how to make pretty buildings, there are plenty of architecture schools for you. If you want to learn how to change the world through architecture, then Taliesen is the place for you. And in our school, when students live in Arizona, they live in desert shelters that they actually design, build, construct, and live in. That is their thesis project. So some schools have a dissertation. Ours is build a structure and live in it for the entire year of your senior year. And first year students have to help those third year students to figure out how the design process works. Go to the next slide. Campaign for Independence. So this is kind of the thing a lot of people have heard about, the school needing to raise money. So in response to the growing number of for-profit colleges around the country, the Higher Learning Commission, by directive mostly from the federal government, had directives to kind of figure out ways that they could maybe slow that progress down or in some cases eliminate them. The reason behind that, the kind of return on investment that the Department of Education applies when they allocate federal financial funds was not being met by those for-profit colleges. So a lot of people who go get a lot of federal financial aid, but then the return on the investment as the Department of Education sees it isn't worth that aid that they're giving taxpayer dollars to. So HLC said, what can we do to target this? They changed their bylaws a few years ago. And what they did is they said from now on, if you're an institution of higher learning, you can no longer be attached to a nonprofit foundation or corporation or any other entity. You got to be independent on your own. That affected very, very, very few schools across the country, as you can imagine. ASU has a foundation, but the schools are run by the foundation, right? It's just a separate thing they have. Well, we're really unique because where our school is, where our campuses are in Spring Green and in Scottsdale, is also where the foundation exists because we are a historical preserve, and in fact, this year will actually be a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which there are only 22 in the world and only 5 man-made, so we would be the 6th if our application is granted. Things like Independence Hall, Empire State Building. So we see 100,000 tourists at both locations every single year. So the foundation exists to do the expensive preservation work of that land and the 600 acres we own at both spaces. They do the licensing for the Frank Lloyd Wright brand, and they do the tours. And then the school runs the school. So we've always existed together. All of a sudden, this ruling says we have to be independent on our own for the first time. And the way that we demonstrate that independence is programmatically and financially. Programmatically, we've done. We have our curriculum, it's been well received. Financially, they said you need to raise $2 million by the end of the year. If you're wondering why $2 million. So they took our current number of students, which is 23, and they times it by what tuition is per year, which is $40,000. And then they factored in the foundation leasing us the land for $1 a year, so basically not having to pay rent. And they factored in a few other school programs that raise some revenue. And they said the remainder to cover your operating costs for the next 5 years is $2 million. So if you can raise $2 million this year, you will guarantee to be financially solvent for at least the next 5 years. So in a sense, this is an annual capital campaign. During the next 5 years, the dean and I plan to increase enrollment to closer to 40 to 50, which would balance the books on tuition alone. And we also want to generate things like a $5 million endowment that we can use for scholarships and reserves. So the school has a plan to be financially sustainable once we cross this hurdle, but we have to cross this hurdle first. The other thing that has made it a challenge, in addition to having 1 year to do it, is that we also can't become independent by just ciphering off partners that have existed with the foundation for years and years and years. I know many of you are thinking, Frank Lloyd Wright designs the S.C. Johnson Wax building, he did the Guggenheim, he did Falling Water, why not just get those entities to write you the check, call it a day? That does not demonstrate independence. Those all have their own financial needs, and we have to find new partners, and that's how we truly indicate that we're independent. The last thing I'll say on this, and then we'll get into the actual great plan, is that while we have to have all commitments by the end of this year, we do not actually have to have the money by the end of this year. So we have until 2019, until December 31st of 2019 to actually collect the money. We just need the commitments this year. And that's because if they're saying, well, this is going to cover your operating costs for the next 5 years, you have those 5 years to gather your costs. So all we ask from investors is they sign a pledge agreement saying in the beginning of 2016, this is the amount we'll fund you per year, or any year that they want. So it doesn't actually have to come this year. Okay, so to date, we've increased this a little bit. We're at about 1.3 million. So we have 700,000 to go in about 6 weeks. And you will notice that, well, right now, 1.1 million of the 1.3 has come from individuals. It has been a very grassroots campaign. It's been very well received by our community members. The largest individual gift from a person is 82,000 over the course of 5 years. It's like 13,000 a year. So we haven't gotten someone to just come in and write us $500,000 check. It's been a very, very grassroots campaign, which we're very proud of, and it has allowed us to resist the temptation of going community to community, hat in hand, signing on smaller projects. And in a way, we've kind of put our eggs in this basket. We want to be here. We understand it's a risk in order to realize those resources in time, but we said, rather than commit ourselves and take away resources from this project, let's pursue this as our big community-wide project. So why do we want to be here? Why do we choose this location? First of all is the enormous amount of potential it poses geographically. So it's snowing today. That's pretty rare. I am a rare breed in that I am actually from Arizona. So most people who reside in Phoenix, where I was born and raised, are not from there. But I am. I graduated from ASU. And this is a very, very unique place geographically, right? You have desert, you have forest, you have greens, you have it all kind of mixed in, and that's really intriguing to architects. Secondly, there's a lack of data that is really needed. So from an academic standpoint, our faculty looked at this and said, everyone right now is studying cities. They're studying urban centers. Nobody is studying more rural areas and non-urban areas, which is a huge problem because that's a significant portion of our country. And nobody is studying those things. So we really wanted to be able to collect some data and some field research on suburban and rural areas. Go to the next one. We got here in January. This was totally not planning for this type of strategy, right? So this big grant request that we're coming to, our faculty didn't have funding in mind. They didn't have the campaign in mind. They just said, we really want to work in Global Miami. So they just came down here and they brought some students and they did a seminar. And they met with a lot of incredible community members. And this is where really the seed was planted. This is what got the ball rolling because there was this weird and very special mix, this unique mix of passionate stakeholders in the community. And so the fact that all of you are sitting in this room right now today is the clearest example of that. This does not happen in other communities across the country. And we do a lot of community projects all across the country and in some places all across the world. And to have the level of participation and passion from everything from big companies to local store owners to community residents to city council members, get them all in a room, this does not happen. And so I also just want to point that out, that there exists this level of participation we haven't seen in any other community that we've worked in, and you should take a lot of pride in that. We want to capitalize on that. So we began the process. If you go to the next slide, it just shows you some of the meetings we had while we were here. Go to the next slide. So this is kind of what we discovered. We came back, we assessed, we said what were the areas that needed to be focused on the most. The first was the economic strengths. What were some of the things we could do to help spur economic activity, both on the local business level as well as kind of the larger long-term level. We also saw that there was a propensity for the younger generation to leave early or to feel like there are not a lot of opportunities for them. And that was something We also then, as a catalyst, leaded to an aging population due to the departure of millennials, kind of skewing the balance in the town. What were the areas of identified potential? Easily accessible, so close to major urban centers. This is really important because you are far enough away that you're your own place. You have your own identity, you have your own autonomy, you have a rich, special, and unique state history as well as local history that I think needs to be tapped into all across Arizona and across the region, where you're also close enough to where commerce and trade and business is all possible. That is also very rare and unique and something we were pretty excited about. We talked about the smart, strong, and dynamic population. There's both opportunity for natural beauty as well as artificial beauty that's been created by some of the industries here. And then, of course, as you probably have noticed, some of these buildings, some of the older ones, have some pretty remarkable and significant architecture. And of course, we're pretty interested in that. So we came up with some goals. The first is, how do we just restore or tap into pride that already exists or that we know can be enhanced? Because we know that this has to come organically from the community. How do we help spur economic development and attract new businesses to the area? So yes, tourism is a big thing that we think can be bolstered and we want to work with the community on and work with the Chamber of Commerce on. But we also think that just business development is actually the strongest potential, that we can help make this an attractive environment to bring in other business owners or to lend credence to local business owners who maybe didn't want to take that leap or that chance because they weren't sure what was happening in their area. And now that there's a cohesive strategy, they feel more confident in buying that land and starting their business. We also wanted to develop strategies that attract young people, that get them involved in the project. We want to involve everyone in the community, but we really take it a responsibility to get the younger generation some opportunities both in and out of school and how they can kind of take some responsibility for their town. And then revitalize the beauty and rich history of the city by showcasing local talent. So we'll talk about an international art residency program. Yeah, we want to bring artists from around the world here to work with local artists. We don't want to bring them here and have them say, okay, we've arrived, this is what we're going to do. They want to run programs that tap into the local talent here and showcase that. So how do we do this? What's our strategy? Beautification of existing structures and surfaces. We want to repurpose significant buildings, spaces, and empty lots. And then community engagement. We felt like this was really important to actually list out as a strategy, to actually hold ourselves accountable and everything we put in as a strategy are there then metrics attached to on whether or not this was successful and how far it moved the needle. I cannot stress this enough. Taliesen does not believe we can fix every problem. What we are offering is a team of resources, expertise, people power to come in and work with the local community and you all to realize a shared vision and a shared dream and help guide that design and vision process to make it accomplish what it is the community wants to accomplish. That's our goal. And it cannot work unless we have community participation. So in all honesty, if someone walked in and said, here's $1 million, do this project, and there were 3 people sitting here, we'd be really worried. We'd say, I don't actually know if we're going to be able to carry out what it is we're carrying out. But the fact that there's this many people in the room and the support we've already gotten and the participation we've already received is very encouraging to us that we will work with the community very well on this. And we also want to work with the city on the 2035 general plan and all of their kind of long-term plans. And part of us going to the city council, both for Miami and Globe, is to make sure that none of our efforts take away from what the city is already planning on doing. Instead, our pitch to them is, if you have areas you want us to steer clear from, we will. Otherwise, in any way that we can aid and enhance your implementation, we'd be honored to do so. So this just kind of goes through the tactics, which I will show you actually visually. But facade improvements, roof repairs, addressing street fronts, putting furniture on there, places for people to stay, revitalization of buildings, art programs, all part of what we want to do. And we'll actually show you how we want to do that. these were the key areas of focus. These are not set in stone. These are the areas we thought were most important, and then were also articulated to us as being most important. But if a local store owner says, I want my thing in the project, or I want to participate, we'll add them into the fold. And all of these are pretty broad to where there's a lot that encompass into them. So funding. So so we're not asking taxpayers or the city for funding. So I want to clarify that. We are not asking the city council to fund us. We are asking private companies, private investors, any local business owners that want to participate and fund it. That's who we're going towards to fund the project. Our assessment, so I mentioned this in the last meeting, and I think it is important to articulate. If the school was not in the situation it is in right now, in needing to raise this $2 million by the end of the year, there's no way we could promise what it is that we were promising for $1 million. Our board would never allow it. Our members would go crazy, and every other community we've ever done a project with would be like, what the heck? But we recognize that there's urgency to our ask, that the investors we're asking to step outside their normal procedures, and we're asking them to make these commitments this year. And so because we want to be here, and because this is the amount we think will successfully get us to our goal and the school will survive, then we've whittled it down to the minimum amount of money, the best discount we can provide to the community. And so to give you an idea, we've done master plan strategies for sections of communities, where there's maybe we design an apartment complex and a park and a building, and that master plan takes us 2-3 months, ends up being $700,000-$800,000 in commissions for that one drawing. Because we're going to bring in architects from all across the state and all across the country. We're going to consult with the best if we don't already have them in-house. The students are basically signing over their intellectual property behind the design, and then we're going to pay for the materials to actually implement these strategies. So that would be tens of millions of dollars if we were to charge you a straight contract, or any architect firm were to charge you a straight contract. But instead, what we're offering is a 4-year studio of continuous work, 4 years, for a grant. And we'd like to see it close to the $1 million investment total from all of the investors we're going to. And we think we could get it going for a minimum of $500,000. So that kind of shows you where we're at. If you want to know, what do you get for that? So what are our qualifications? What makes us qualified to do this project? And what can we offer? First thing is flexibility. So by proposing a grant instead of a contract, that means we can meet the needs as they unfold. If a store owner gets involved in year 2 or year 3, we can adapt. If things change or the city has an opinion on something they want us to change, we can adapt in real time. Nothing is set in stone. We can add things in. We can work with local owners. Expertise. So we just did a project in Ajo, and we just did a housing project in Cave Creek. This is something that we are very familiar doing. We're doing a lot of smaller projects over the years. So we have the expertise on actually how to implement the strategy. And then our faculty and the people on our board, they're licensed professional architects. So they're not only licensed and insured, they have that kind of expertise and also the insurance liability that goes with it. But they also are familiar on how to navigate the process with local store owners, with the city council, with all of the building and zoning. We won't actually be changing ordinances. We're not changing the structural integrity, so it would be very rare that we'd have to ask the city to change any ordinances or codes. But again, one of the reasons we're going to them is that we can embark on a partnership, and that's a constant dialogue, and we make sure we don't violate any codes. Faculty and staff resources. So I mentioned that we spend 5 months of the year in Spring Green, Wisconsin. We are not going to take a break from this project when we are there. Instead, there's a whole set of this that will require the actual design. So when we're actually creating the concept, doing the models of what that will be, the in-studio time we plan on doing while in Spring Green, so that when they come back to Arizona for those 7 months, they can do proof of concept and actually physically implement the changes they've been working on. And then experience. So Students, like I said, as a thesis project, have to build their own desert shelter. So we give them very hands-on projects that they actually have to carry out themselves. We have the experience on actually how to do this in the community. If you go to the next one, what else can we offer? This is more on the kind of additional investment side. So name recognition and brand awareness. We are in a little bit of a dire situation, obviously, to get the project up and running. But once it's up and running, we still believe it is our responsibility to continue bringing in additional development for project-specific things here in Global Miami. So if during the project, the community says, we need a library, or we need a community center, that's nowhere in the budget of our studio, we will solicit that. We will go out, not just in this area, but all across the country and all across the globe, and actually solicit funds to then do that. And we will use our name recognition and our brand awareness to also promote this. So I mentioned both of our locations each get 100,000 people a year that visit us. 85% of those people are not from Arizona, right? Because it's a historical thing. They put it on their list of things to see when they're here, but they want to know what the students are doing. And if we say, if you want to drive 90 minutes and get a first-hand view, that is something that is very, very appealing to these people, because the people that come are pretty passionate about Frank Lloyd Wright, pretty passionate about wanting to see what is the real life work. So there are a lot of ways that we can also promote the town and promote the initiatives all across the country. Corporate sponsorships. So we are a 501c3 tax-exempt organization that both counts for any kind of commitments we get for this project as well as the future. We use that tax-exempt status as much as we can to get as many materials donated. So students actually write their own letters of solicitation to companies and say, I want the best canopy material, or I want the newest and greatest fiberglass to put on my desert shelter. I'm going to put it up in the desert. You can see if it lasts out there. We'd love to use your product. And companies donate that to us all the time because they like to partner with the school, and it's a tax incentive for that. We will continue to use that for all of the projects on this, all of the materials, and all of the additional work we want to do. I mentioned studio staff time. Our students will be consulting with some of the best architects around the world. So we have a lecture series with lecturers that are already committed, and they will spend a week with us at our school working with the students on whatever the project is. We hope it's this project. Some of those people are Zaha Hadid, Frank Gehry, who designed the Walt Disney Symphony Hall, Julie Eisenberg and Hank Conan, some of the Winnie Mass, some of the most accomplished architects, most notable architects alive today are coming because they could give lectures to 5,000 people anytime they want, right? But they're coming to Taliesen because they want to actually work with students and get that intimate approach. We're going to be able to expose this project to them, some of the best minds around the world, and get their take on it. And then art residency program, we run an international art residency program. We think that's a huge economic driver. Our art residency program generates a good deal of money for the school, and we think we could bring that here to both showcase local talent as well have some kind of visiting paid seminar that people around the country can come to Globe and take a workshop. And then intellectual property, so with our whole shebang, 1 million or 500,000 or anywhere in between, you get all of the kind of intellectual property and capacity that comes with the design for our buildings. Regional master plan, we want to collect data the whole time we are here to continue putting together a 10, 20-year strategy. So we don't just want to change the aesthetic look and feel, we want to actually impact real trends like lower unemployment, more job opportunity, all of these kind of indicators. These are things that you can actually track how much investment from businesses is occurring annually. We want to move the needle on those things. And then if the city or any group wants our help or wants our support in their own plans or their own solicitation, we view that as a partnership, and we will absolutely help with any of that. And then again, additional solicitation and development. So it just kind of shows you what we're delivering is both the product generation, which now we'll get into the fun stuff and the visuals, the additional investment and development that we will continue to seek over 40 years, the property, intellectual property that comes with our design. This just